They're going to get them soon. Those 6 words are spreading fast, whispered by searchers, repeated online, and fueling one dangerous question. Does someone finally know what happened to Lilly and Jack Sullivan, or is this hope outrunning facts? Stay with me, because what police are saying now matters more than any rumor. Before we talk about that statement, we need to rewind, because without the full context, this case is easy to misunderstand. On May 2nd, Lilly Sullivan, 6 years old, and Jack Sullivan, just 4, vanished from their rural home in Pictou County, Nova Scotia. The disappearance didn't begin with chaos. There were no broken doors, no shattered windows, no signs of a struggle inside or outside the house. Nothing that immediately suggested violence or intrusion. From an investigative standpoint, the scene offered very little to work with, and that, in itself, was alarming. There were no confirmed sightings after the initial time window. No neighbors reported seeing the children walking along nearby roads. No drivers came forward with dashcam footage, placing them elsewhere. No trail cameras captured movement through the surrounding woods. And because there was no immediate evidence of abduction, no confirmed suspect, and no proof the children were taken by force, an Amber Alert was not issued. Investigators initially believed the most likely explanation was that the children may have wandered away on their own. But that assumption came with urgency. Within hours, the search effort exploded. RCMP officers flooded the area. Ground search and rescue teams moved in. Drones were launched overhead. Helicopters scanned from above. Hundreds of trained volunteers and community members joined in, forming search lines across fields, woods, and uneven terrain. Thousands of acres were combed, not once, but repeatedly, as teams worked against time, weather, and fading daylight. This wasn't a limited or symbolic search. It was aggressive, expansive, and relentless. Properties were checked. Trails were retraced. Ditches, water sources, and structures were examined. Search dogs were deployed. Areas thought unlikely were searched anyway, because when children are missing, assumptions are dangerous. And yet nothing. No discarded clothing. No footprints leading away from the home. No clear trail suggesting direction or distance. No definitive evidence explaining where the children went or how they left the area. That silence became the loudest element of the case. In most wandering scenarios involving young children, something is found, a shoe, a scent trail, a confirmed sighting, a point where movement makes sense. Here, the absence of those indicators created a growing discomfort among investigators. The environment should have left answers behind. It didn't. That absence is what shifted this case from a missing persons investigation into one of the most unsettling disappearances in recent Canadian history, not because of what was discovered, but because of what wasn't. And here's the part many people miss. The search never really stopped. It just changed. From visible boots on the ground to quieter reconstruction. From distance-based searching to timeline analysis. From terrain to behavior. From where the children could have gone to what doesn't align with the idea that they simply wandered away. And that shift is where the case truly became something else entirely. Months later, RCMP quietly confirmed something important. And it didn't come in the form of a press conference or a dramatic announcement. This case, they said, is still being actively reconstructed, not shelved. That wording matters. Cases that are shelved are static. They sit untouched, waiting for something external to revive them. Reconstruction is different. It means investigators are still testing the shape of the case itself, still adjusting how the pieces fit together, still questioning what they thought they understood early on. Since the disappearance, investigators have reviewed hundreds of tips from the public, each one logged, each one assessed for timing, location, and consistency. Many tips don't lead anywhere. But in cases like this, patterns matter as much as specifics. A single detail may mean nothing on its own, but when it aligns with others, it demands attention. Thousands of video files have also been analyzed. Dash cams, security cameras, traffic footage, private systems offered voluntarily by residents. This process is slow, technical, and unglamorous. Investigators aren't looking for a perfect image or a clear face. They're looking for absence and interruption. A vehicle that shouldn't be there. A gap where something should appear. A moment that no longer matches the assumed timeline. Follow-up interviews have been conducted as well. Not just once, but again. People spoken to early in the investigation were revisited as new context emerged. That doesn't happen when a case is closing. It happens when earlier answers no longer fully explain later questions. Most telling of all, RCMP confirmed they re-examined timelines and assumptions. That phrase signals a fundamental shift. It means investigators acknowledge that early working theories, including how and when the children may have moved, needed to be challenged. In investigative terms, assumptions are dangerous if left untested. There have been no arrests. No suspect has been named. But just as important, nothing has been ruled out. That balance is critical. It means the case hasn't narrowed into a single explanation. It means investigators are still holding multiple possibilities in play because evidence hasn't eliminated them. And that restraint isn't weakness. It's discipline. Cold cases don't get rebuilt unless something still fits. Investigators don't revisit timelines, rewatch footage, or reopen interviews unless details continue to resist closure. Reconstruction only happens when unanswered questions remain structurally important. And that's why this confirmation matters. Because it leads directly to the sentence everyone is talking about, the one that suggests investigators believe resolution isn't a matter of if something happened, but where the story stopped making sense. That statement did not come from the RCMP. It did not come from an official press release, a briefing, or a carefully worded update. It came from searchers and community voices, people who walked the terrain, who stood in the rain, who scanned tree lines and ditches hour after hour, and who carried the emotional weight of looking for two children who never appeared. That context matters. Because what those words reflect is not confirmation. It is not insider information. It is not evidence of a breakthrough being hidden from the public. What it reflects is belief, the kind that forms when people have seen how seriously a case is being treated behind the scenes. Belief that investigators know more than they can responsibly say. Belief that answers exist, even if they can't yet be spoken out loud. Belief that the truth hasn't vanished. Only the clarity of the timeline has. In emotionally charged cases involving children, people close to the search often sense when something hasn't gone cold. Not because they're told, but because of what continues to happen quietly. Questions still being asked, areas still being revisited, calls still being made. Momentum doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it looks controlled. And history shows us something important. Police do not broadcast progress in sensitive cases involving children. They don't share partial conclusions. They don't speculate publicly. And they don't reveal what they're testing internally if doing so could compromise an outcome, contaminate tips, or alert the wrong person. Silence in those cases isn't negligence. It's protocol. Silence doesn't mean stagnation. Silence doesn't mean nothing is happening. Sometimes silence means pressure is building. Pressure to get it right. Pressure to avoid missteps. Pressure to ensure that when answers do come, they're definitive, not walk back later. That's why statements like this emerge in the community instead of official channels. They're emotional interpretations of persistence. They're expressions of hope shaped by fatigue and proximity to the search. They're not facts, but they aren't meaningless either. They tell us how the case feels to the people closest to it. But here's the line we cannot cross. Belief must never become accusation. Hope must never become certainty. And speculation must never replace evidence. Because until investigators speak in facts, not feelings, this case remains what has always been. Unresolved, carefully handled, and unfinished. Let's be very clear. This does not mean a suspect has been identified. It does not mean an arrest is imminent. It does not mean the children have been located. Anyone claiming otherwise, especially online, is speculating. And in a case this sensitive, speculation doesn't just confuse the public. It risks harming the investigation and the people connected to it. There is a critical difference between verified information and interpretation, and that line matters more here than in almost any other type of case. What has been confirmed is far more restrained, but far more telling. The case remains open, not symbolically, not procedurally, actively open. Investigators have not closed files, stopped analysis, or reduced the case to a waiting state. They continue to work it quietly and methodically, because unresolved elements still demand explanation. It is also confirmed that key assumptions from the early days of the investigation are being questioned. That alone is significant. Early assumptions guide search areas, timelines, and priorities. When those assumptions are later re-examined, it means something didn't align as expected. Evidence, or the absence of it, challenge the original narrative. This doesn't mean investigators now know exactly what happened. It means they know what doesn't fully explain what happened. And in complex cases, eliminating flawed assumptions is often the only path forward. Investigators don't question their own foundation unless there's reason to. They don't rebuild timelines unless pieces no longer fit. And they don't keep options open unless closing them would be irresponsible. That's why this matters. Not because of dramatic claims or viral statements, but because of disciplined restraint. Because nothing essential has been ruled out. Because no explanation has yet satisfied the evidence that exists and the evidence that doesn't. That alone tells us the story is not over. It hasn't reached resolution. It hasn't reached certainty. And until it does, this case remains active, not in headlines, but in the work still happening behind them. Months later, RCMP quietly confirmed something important. And it didn't come in the form of a press conference or a dramatic announcement. This case, they said, is still being actively reconstructed, not shelved. That wording matters. Cases that are shelved are static. They sit untouched, waiting for something external to revive them. Reconstruction is different. It means investigators are still testing the shape of the case itself, still adjusting how the pieces fit together, still questioning what they thought they understood early on. Since the disappearance, investigators have reviewed hundreds of tips from the public, each one logged. Each one assessed for timing, location, and consistency. Many tips don't lead anywhere. But in cases like this, patterns matter as much as specifics. A single detail may mean nothing on its own, but when it aligns with others, it demands attention.